Picture this, two neighboring countries in Central America, locked in a fierce battle for a spot in the 1970 World Cup. The tension boils over into riots, and before anyone can catch their breath, full-scale war erupts. Thousands lose their lives in just 4 days. It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? A war sparked by a football match? But as we'll see, the beautiful game was merely the match that lit a long-fused powder keg. This is the Football War of 1969, a brief but brutal clash that claimed lives, displaced families, and left scars that took decades to heal. To set the stage, let's go back to June 1969. El Salvador and Honduras were drawn against each other in the qualifiers for the World Cup in Mexico. These weren't just any games, they were high-stakes encounters in a region where football is more than a sport. It's a passion that unites and sometimes divides nations. The first match was in Tegucigalpa, Honduras' capital, the second in San Salvador, El Salvador's bustling heart, and if needed a decider in neutral territory. But beneath the excitement lay years of simmering resentment. The matches didn't cause the war, they accelerated a crisis that had been building for decades. So, why were these two countries on such a knife edge? It all stems from geography, economics, and human movement. El Salvador is a tiny nation, about the size of Wales, but densely populated. By the late 1960s, it had around 3.5 million people squeezed into just over 20,000 square kilometers. Honduras, its larger neighbor to the north and east, spans more than 5 times that area, with a population of about 2.5 million. For years, Salvadorans had migrated across the border in search of better opportunities, particularly land for farming. By 1969, estimates suggest up to 300,000 Salvadorans were living in Honduras, many having settled there generations ago. This migration created friction. Honduras was undergoing land reforms in the 1960s, aimed at redistributing unused farmland to its own peasants. Many Salvadoran families had settled on underused land, farming it for years. But Honduras's land reforms threatened to displace them, often violently. Honduran nationalists, backed by powerful landowners and the government, began agitating against these foreigners. Laws were passed to seize land from non-citizens, leading to evictions, violence, and forced repatriations. Thousands of Salvadorans fled back home, often penniless and traumatized, straining El Salvador's already overburdened resources. Economic tensions compounded the problem. Trade between the two was imbalanced. El Salvador exported more to Honduras than it imported, creating resentment. Border disputes festered too, undefined frontiers that both sides claimed, and underpinning it all was a rising tide of nationalism. Governments on both sides stoked patriotic fervor through media and rhetoric, portraying the other as a threat. In El Salvador, the military regime under President Fidel Sanchez Hernandez used anti-Honduran sentiment to distract from domestic woes like poverty and inequality. In Honduras, President Osvaldo López Arellano faced similar pressures. The stage was set for confrontation. All it needed was a spark. That spark came with the football qualifiers. The first leg on 8th June in Tegucigalpa was played amid an electric atmosphere. Honduran fans camped outside the Salvadoran team's hotel, blaring horns and shouting insults all night to disrupt their sleep. The match itself was scrappy, with Honduras scraping a 1-0 win, but the real trouble erupted afterwards. Salvadoran fans were attacked in the streets. Some were beaten, their vehicles torched. Reports of mistreatment filtered back to El Salvador, fueling outrage. The return leg, a week later on the 15th of June in San Salvador, was payback. Now it was the Honduran team's turn to endure sleepless nights, harassed by crowds throwing stones and dead rats at their hotel. On the pitch, El Salvador dominated, winning 3-0, but off it, violence exploded. Honduran supporters were assaulted as they left the stadium. Many fled in fear. With the series tied, a playoff was scheduled for June 27th in Mexico City. Neutral ground, but no less intense. Over 20,000 fans from both sides descended on the Aztec Stadium. The game went to extra time, with El Salvador clinching a 3-2 victory amid chaotic scenes. Riots broke out in the stands. Players were pelted with objects. Back home, celebrations in El Salvador turned ugly for Hondurans living there, while in Honduras, Salvadoran communities faced reprisals. The matches had amplified nationalistic hatred, turning neighbors into enemies. In the weeks that followed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Honduras expelled more Salvadorans, leading to border skirmishes. Diplomatic ties were severed on the 26th of June. On 14 July 1969, Salvadoran forces launched a surprise invasion. Their air force bombed Honduran airports and military bases, while ground troops advanced into Honduran territory, capturing several towns. Honduras retaliated with airstrikes on Salvadoran oil refineries and ports. The conflict was primitive by modern standards. Both sides used World War II airplanes and relied on infantry, but it was deadly. Salvadoran troops pushed deep into Honduras, aiming for the capital, but were halted by Honduran resistance and logistical issues. The war dragged on for 4 days, or about 100 hours, hence its other name, the 100-Hour War. International pressure mounted quickly. The Organization of American States, OAS, brokered a ceasefire on 18 July, though fighting sputtered on briefly. By then, the toll was horrific. Around 3,000 people dead, mostly civilians, and tens of thousands displaced. Homes were destroyed, economies shattered. In the aftermath, neither side truly won. El Salvador withdrew its troops by early August, but the underlying issues lingered. A formal peace treaty wasn't signed until 1980, and border disputes were only resolved by the International Court of Justice in 1992. The war exacerbated poverty in both nations, with refugees struggling to rebuild lives. Today, El Salvador and Honduras have moved towards reconciliation, with football now a bridge rather than a battleground. But the memory serves as a caution. Address the roots of discord before they erupt. Thanks for joining me on this journey through history. If you found this video intriguing, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and let me know in the comments what other historical events tied to sport you'd like to see covered. And if you're curious about more of the beautiful game's darker side, check out our video on England's most dangerous football grounds right here.